Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is April 11th. On this day in 1981, a quiet mountain town in Northern California was rocked by a crime so brutal, it's still considered to be one of the most disturbing unsolved murders in state history. Inside a modest vacation cabin at a worn-down resort, 3 people, 36-year-old Glenna Sue Sharp, her 15-year-old son John, and his 17-year-old friend Dana Wingate, were found dead. And Sue's 12-year-old daughter Tina was nowhere to be found. The Keddie murders would go on to become one of California's most baffling cold cases. It's a case that's wrapped in mystery, missteps, and decades of unanswered questions. And even now, more than 40 years later, it still haunts the people of Plumas County. So today, we're going to go back to April 11th, 1981 to examine what happened in Cabin 28 and why the truth has remained so elusive. Let's get started. The Sharp family hadn't lived in Keddie for very long when tragedy struck. Glenna Susan Sharp, who went by Sue, had moved there from Connecticut with her 5 children after leaving an abusive marriage. She was trying to start over and give her kids a fresh chance in a safer place. They settled into Cabin 28 at the Keddie Resort, a fading collection of cabins tucked into the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was rustic and the area had seen better days. But it offered what Sue was really looking for: peace. Sue worked hard, taking on odd jobs to support her family while her oldest son, John, started at the local high school in nearby Quincy. It wasn't easy, but by all accounts, Sue was doing everything she could to keep things steady for her children. But that fragile stability was shattered on April 11th, 1981. April 12th was a quiet Sunday morning, and that's when 14-year-old Sheila Sharp walked home after spending the night at a friend's cabin. She expected a typical morning, maybe breakfast, maybe some chores. But what she found was a nightmare. Inside Cabin 28, the living room was drenched in blood. Her mother Sue, her brother John, and his friend Dana Wingate were all lying dead, bound with electrical cords and medical tape. They had been brutally attacked with multiple weapons, including knives and at least one hammer. The violence was horrifying. Sue's throat had been slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. John and Dana had both suffered blunt force trauma and stab wounds. Dana had also been strangled. But there was something even more chilling. 12-year-old Tina was nowhere to be found. Remarkably, the younger children, Rick and Greg, were asleep in the other room, completely unharmed. Sheila ran to a neighbor's house to call for help, and from there the investigation began, but it didn't start well. Plumas County deputies arrived quickly, but securing the crime scene? That didn't happen. Friends, neighbors, and even members of the media wandered in and out of the cabin before it was fully sealed off. In those crucial first hours, evidence was likely compromised or lost entirely. Still, what investigators did find painted a disturbing picture. Signs of a struggle, bindings made from duct tape and wire, and a bent steak knife that hinted at the ferocity of the attack. Oddly, there was no sign of forced entry. Tina's disappearance at first actually gave people hope. They thought that maybe she had run away, terrified, and escaped. But as days passed and there was no sign of her, that hope began to fade. In fact, it would take 3 years for the worst to be confirmed. In 1984, a bottle collector hiking near Camp 18, roughly 60 miles from Keddie, came across part of a human skull. Forensic analysis identified it as Tina's. Her remains were scattered and degraded, and so her cause of death couldn't be determined. But the manner of death, it was ruled a homicide. As investigators scrambled to make sense of what had happened, suspicions started to form around two men. Martin Smart, who lived just 2 cabins down, and his house guest, John Bo Bobede, a former Chicago police officer with a shady past. Martin's stepson, Justin Smart, had been sleeping over at the Sharp home that night. In a strange twist, Justin later described, under hypnosis, waking up to see Sue being attacked by 2 men. One had long hair and a mustache. The other was clean-shaven. He described screams, a struggle, and Tina being taken out of the back door. Using Justin's account, police created composite sketches. The resemblance to Martin and Bo was hard to ignore. But still, nothing came of it. No arrests, no charges. Years later, Martin's wife, Marilyn Smart, came forward with even more disturbing claims. She said Martin had confessed to the murders. She also said that she found a bloody jacket in her basement and that Martin had thrown away a claw hammer not long after the killings. A hammer, it's worth noting, is believed to have been one of the murder weapons. Then, in 2016, 35 years later, a hammer matching that description was found in a nearby pond. It was consistent with the wounds found on the victims, but unfortunately, time had erased any other evidence. Over time, the Keddie murders became something of a local legend. People whispered theories. Some believed there had been a cover-up. And with both Martin Smart and Bo Bobede dying in the early 2000s, any chance of a confession died with them. In 2013, new investigators reopened the case with fresh eyes and new forensic tools. They uncovered overlooked evidence, including a letter Martin had written to Marilyn that said, quote, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives," end quote. Then, in 2018, DNA recovered from a piece of tape at the crime scene was matched to a known living suspect. But that person's identity has never been publicly released. And once again, no arrests were made. Today, more than 40 years later, the Keddie murders remain unsolved. For survivors like Sheila Sharp, justice has felt like a promise unfulfilled. She's spoken publicly in recent years, not just about her grief, but about her belief that the original investigation failed her family and that certain people were protected. What happened in Cabin 28 wasn't just a horrific crime. It was a community tragedy, and a case that people still talk about to this day. The answers feel like they're so close, but the truth has remained just out of reach. But if there's one thing that we know, it's that oftentimes while justice can feel elusive, there's always hope that one day the answers will finally be found. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really helps us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!